Hello, Professor Bean. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great, great, great. Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming to my interview today. And I just want to talk with you about your perspective about how background musics on VR platforms or in Metaverse can affect VR users' behaviors, and particularly how that could economically change the Metaverse industry. Before I start with the questions, could you please introduce yourself, like your careers in Stanford and what are you doing with the VR labs here? So
Yeah,
yep.
sure thing. So I'm Brian Beams. I'm the manager of the Virtual Human Interaction Lab, where I assist with general research and development of different experiments within the lab, as well as managing the hardware and software that we use to create all of our virtual experiments.
Great, great, great. So my first question would be, so a lot of people like to listen to music, and I'm sure that you also like to listen to a variety of music. So to start off, I want to ask you what kind of music that you always like to listen to, so like pop music, jazz, or classicals, any sort of music that you like to listen.
Yeah, I would say I listen to a pretty wide range of music, mostly instrumentals, I think, because they're nice to listen to while I'm working. If you're writing code, it's really distracting when somebody's talking into your ear. So I listen to a lot of instrumental music, a lot of experimental and electronic music as well. Those seem to be my bread and butter these days. But other than that, yeah, I listen to, indie pop music. If I'm feeling like reliving my high school years, I'll listen to emo rock music, or things like that. But yeah, I'd say that's probably covers the genres that I listen to most. But I'm pretty open to most music, I would say.
Wow. Yeah, same for me. Like I usually listen to a lot of instrumental music, particularly like violin and piano. I love classical music. They really sort of keep me like up with the mood and like keep me working with my stuff. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure instrumental music is a pretty good way of keeping people in track with their work. And yeah. So my next question would be, so let's jump back to the VR things and the metaverse type of questions. So my next question would be, how can music affect VR users' virtual behavior and their emotional state? So compared to users that on VR platforms where there's no background music and versus this background music, how would their behavior or their emotional states change in terms of that?
Yeah, so I think we could look at the real life when we're thinking about how music affects people's experience in a virtual environment. So imagine you go into a restaurant and there's no music playing. I think that it would have the same sort of effect as a virtual environment with no music playing. So you go to a restaurant, there's no music, you feel very uncomfortable. I think that there is this discomfort that we have with silence, and by having some sort of background music, it makes the place feel more lived in, and I think that that's probably true for both real world environments and for virtual environments. So I would say a good starting point, if you would be interested in researching these things, would be look at retail and how they use music in retail environments. So think about the type of music that they would play at a McDonald's versus the kind of music that they would play at a high-end restaurant. There's lots of research that's been done about those effects, especially in things like marketing and market research, but also I think you probably look at musical theory as well.
Yeah. Like like a lot of instances where music are played like in restaurants, in like shopping centers, where people walk in the shopping centers and they listen to all this variety of background music can really change the way they kind of consume things, like consumes things in McDonald's or buying products in the shopping malls itself. But like throughout these courses into the metaverse course here at Stanford Summers, so I've learned that when people went into like metaverse platforms, their behavior tends to be different compared to like physical realities.
Mhm.
And is that going to like be a potential impact or potential concerns that when people listening to music on VR platforms or virtual realities, are they gonna behave differently or are they gonna act differently compared to when they listen to background music in the reality, in the physical world? So
Yeah, I mean, I think the interactions, are different just because, we don't have a physical body in
mhm,
these spaces.
yeah.
I think overall the way people would feel emotionally about a virtual environment versus a real world environment with and without music
Mhm.
is pretty similar. So even the absence of music or the absence of audio means something. This is a tool that's used in like film and games as well, where if you just have sort of ambient audio compared to background music, it creates a sort of tension. And so I think,
Yes.
there to a certain degree, um, if you wanted people to experience a virtual environment, um, you know,
Mm.
on their own, or let's say it's something that like a virtual gym or a virtual shopping center. I think that you would want to have background music. And now that wouldn't necessarily be true for a place where you would want to be having a conversation in virtual reality, right? Like there's not background music while
Yes.
you and I are talking, and
Yeah.
that could be distracting. So I
Yeah.
think that while there are some differences in how people react to a virtual environment, I think that we could find a lot of similarities as well. And maybe the similarities are more important to look at than the differences, because I think the differences boil down to a difference in interface, not necessarily a difference in attitude.
Okay. So so you're suggesting that like there are lots of similarities between the physical and virtual worlds in terms of how people perceive music.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do agree with you that like even though music can like are played in the metaverse, but like a lot of instances people might still act in the same ways when they listen to like a variety of music. And I think for a lot of times when we use like metaverse, it's usually based on like what kind of environmental settings. Maybe
Mhm.
like when you walk into like a very casual virtual settings, you tend to listen to music that is kind of casual, or when you walk into like a very intense or very sort of energetic settings in VR, like a war field in VR, maybe we tend to like listen to like a more sort of energetic or like more sort of openness music, I guess.
Mhm.
So um my next question would be, so we have talked a lot about how music can be listened on both virtual and physical realities. So my question would be, how is there any ways that you have in mind that music could be implemented to boost VR users experience and contribute towards more development in the VR industry? So like, for example, is there any way that music can be played in the background so that it can attract more VR users and that you can attract more sort of financial investments into the industry?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said before, restaurants and stores and other shops like that play music in order to attract people into their spaces. So if we're
Yeah.
talking about, a future metaverse where, it's like a virtual mall or, some sort of, co-present space,
Hmm.
we could utilize the spatial audio technology that virtual reality offers, and the music would draw people to particular locations. I think
Yeah.
that's you know part of human nature. We want to go investigate something if it begins to you know sort of tweak our senses, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. So if you're in a virtual space and you hear what sounds like, a violin playing in the distance, we would go investigate that, similar to how we would investigate it in the real world. So I think utilizing spatialized audio in order to draw people's attention to certain things is something that would help, drive attention, right? And as we know from, social media networks and all of these other platforms, attention is, a big moneymaker. So I think if you want to think about how it could fuel industry in virtual reality, I think by using music to attract attention to things, then you can have more engagement and therefore more revenue, depending on whatever thing that you would be producing for the metaverse.
Yeah. I agree with you. So I think like not just music itself, but like the genre of the music, like classical music or like pop music, can attract like users differently based on the user's preference, I think. So maybe like this could be like when classical music or pop music or Korean music are played like either, is it going to like have like different impacts to the users, or like
Absolutely.
does the music tempo or the dynamic or the lyrics of the music itself could like have a different impact to the VR users on virtual environments?
Yeah, I believe so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's something that has maybe not been studied in any sort of depth. Not for virtual environments at least, but I'm convinced that there is going to be a measurable difference. So depending on what kind of music you play, you'll attract different people there. So if you wanted to have something that would attract a really broad audience, then you would play more pop music. However, if you wanted to present something that is trying to attract maybe a more high-end crowd, maybe you do play more classical music, because people would have an association with classical music and like high quality. You think classical music, Rolexes, Fortune 500 sort of thing, right? Like stuff that rich people like. Whereas, if you're playing pop music really loudly, that would be presented as something that feels more youthful, younger, maybe has more appeal to younger generations. And so I think it whatever music you choose will be defined by the audience for your metaverse environment.
Okay, so that's a pretty interesting question. So for instance, if you want to attract like all the students here in Stanford to use your particular VR metaverse platforms, what kind of music that you would suggest to use for the backgrounds in the VR platform?
Well, I don't know about I don't know about Stanford students, honestly. I might be a little outside of that age bracket to know what all the cool kids like these days. But I still think that's something that's like popular. Find the data that like Spotify released. I think the metaverse and virtual reality, they can really leverage things like data in a way that other places can't. Just by virtue of being an internet-based piece of technology. So imagine you could plug in some sort of Spotify plug-in or something to your metaverse, and then whatever music's playing is in the top 10 list of whatever the user is experiencing. So each person can have a personalized musical profile, and that music is what you would play to attract them there. So I think that there's possibilities for things like that, where you don't even necessarily need to know the music that would attract people, because if you're smart about it and you get permission to access their preferences, their musical preferences, then you can have this very highly specific, tailored environment. And I think that is something that could be successful. So that being said, companies like Spotify, they present all their data, so we know what is popular, we know what's getting the most listens, and that's what I would put to attract the most people.
Yeah. I mean that really makes sense. I mean, like if we like particularly targeting like a group of people in a certain kind of environment, like here on school campus, we can use this kind of specified data to know like which music is the most popular among this group, and then kind of broadcast that music on the virtual environment so that the majority of the users are more enjoyable with that kind of music.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea to implement. So but in terms of technology, I'm not very sure about if we have like enough technology to do that. Maybe like we might require further development in terms of the technology in order to like connect Spotify with like Metaverse. Is that what you think as well?
Right. I mean, I think that the technology is a little bit closer than you might realize.
Yeah.
You know, you could glue together various different components, right? Spotify has integration into all kinds of tech already. It's in their best interest to do so. So I imagine that there's probably a straightforward method where you could move forward and integrate Spotify into the metaverse. Because all the metaverse is really is it's a persistent networked video game. That's all it is. It's a 3D virtual environment through which you interact using controllers and a computer screen. So it's a computer game, and people could integrate dynamic audio from the internet pretty easily in something like Unity or Unreal. I feel like with the right programmers involved, it could be a fairly trivial task.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds really good. I mean, yeah, we are getting there to have that kind of technology to do like connecting Spotify with Metaverse, and yeah, I'm really looking for that sort of things. So I think we're approaching to the end of
Okay.
our meeting here. So do you have any things that you want to add, or any questions, any topics that rose to your mind that you want to talk about?
Yeah, nothing that I can think of right now.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, sure. And then I was like, thank you so much for coming to my interview once again. And I really appreciate your perspective, your ideas that shared to me. And I think that's gonna be really helpful with my research. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to dig deeper into these areas of research about how music can impact VR users in different ways when they kind of access metaverse platforms. And yeah, so if we have any ideas comes up, we can talk with each other again in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, well, great
Yeah,
talking to you, Jason. Good
great.
luck with your project, and good luck with your research. And yeah,
Sure.
I'll see you later.
Great. Thank you so much. See you later.
Bye.
Thank you.